Hello everyone, this is Pomon bringing you yet another Fire Emblem tier list. Today we're going to be ranking the playable characters, the units, in Fire Emblem Blazing Blade, also known as simply Fire Emblem for some people. One of the most popular titles in the series, I would argue, before the new era started with Awakening. This is the most popular title alongside, Fire Emblem 1 and Tellius. Because if you were to ask someone that doesn't know a lot about older Fire Emblem, they will probably talk to you, they will tell you they know Marth, they know Ike, and they probably know Hector. So yeah, that's a sign of how popular this title is. Because of that, let's try and do this tier list properly so that I don't have to find any angry fans. I'm more of a Fire Emblem 6 man myself, but I still really enjoy FE7. I had a lot of criticism for it when I first played it. Actually, it's the first Let's Play in my channel. But with time, I've grown to like how simple some of the decisions in the gameplay are. I like the multiple objectives. I really enjoy most of the maps in the game. I think a lot of the maps have a lot of personality, like it's easy for you to remember when you... It feels like every map in FE7 is so iconic. And it's not a very, very long game like FE6 sometimes tends to be, but it's also not as easy as Sacred Stones. It's a nice midpoint in terms of difficulty, and definitely a good point of entrance into the series if you're able to convince anyone to play a starting game nowadays that is an Awakening or Three Houses. So, we're just going to be ranking every character from S to F tier depending on their contributions to the story. This doesn't necessarily mean how strong a character is by the time you get them, but also just how relevant it is to have that character in your army. You can kind of see it as a measure of the unit's contributions to the army, potentially. So in other words, if a unit is in S tier, the game is very difficult to beat without using them. If a unit is in F tier, then not using them should be absolutely irrelevant for you in terms of beating the game or just making the game easier. So with that out of the way, and also the fact that I'm not going to take the fact that I like or dislike a character, it's not going to influence my decision. We're talking purely about gameplay here. With that out of the way, let's start with the first unit, that is Athos. And I guess it's a good idea that I started with that disclaimer, because Athos is a pretty particular unit, even in the context of, Fire Emblem. Athos belongs to an archetype, very well-known archetype called the Goto archetype. Basically a mission control unit that you get assigned during late game or even just the end game, as is the case for Athos. He is available only for the two maps that compose the endgame, part 1 and part 2, and he's incredibly good when you get him, and probably outshines every mage you have up to that point. So the discussion with Athos isn't really like how powerful he is, because he's clearly one of the best units for the final map of the game, but yes, how relevant it is for your army to have someone like Athos in there. I have to be honest, I've always found mages in FE7 to be sort of underwhelming. They aren't as dodgy as they kind of let them be in FE6, where you could say mages are sometimes the easiest way to deal with the ever-present wyverns that are so dangerous to the rest of your units. So, but in this game, it feels like other types of units, like for example, paladins, flyers, and even to some degree, I would argue that heroes. Heroes are pretty good in terms of combat. They take that spot of being able to dispose of large groups of dangerous enemy units with hand axes, with javelins. Hand axes and javelins are at their prime in FE7. And meanwhile, magic, because of that one-to range option being so easy to use, loses a little bit of relevance. So you only tend to use magic when you face either a physical wall, like for example a general, a wyvern, or when you want to use the utility, when you want to heal. And in that sense, Athos has both aspects covered. He has S rank on light, dark, anima magic, and also staves. So he can provide you with perfect sustain, but also is able to wield like any any tome available in the game for you to be able to damage the enemies. His most valuable uses probably include like being able to use bolting to damage enemies from afar during the last chapter, to be able to use any stave like for example warp or physic or restore, that type of stuff during the last map. That's also very valuable. And finally, and I've left the most important thing for last, he's one of 2 units together with Canas that has access to dark tomes, and that means he can use Luna. Luna is a very valuable tome in this game that ignores the enemy's resistance, which means it's incredible against the final boss of the game. And yes, because of that ability to use Luna, I'm tempted to put Athos like on the upper echelon of the tier list, even if he's available for only 1 chapter. Now, because he's only available for 1 chapter, and you have to compare those contributions to, any other unit that, as much as they don't do something very relevant, they can do that for a long time. I'd say just putting Athos on B tier for now is a good compromise. If later on I notice that everyone in B tier is basically clearly worse than Athos, I might put him a bit higher, but for now we're going to put him in B tier. I think Athos is a fine unit. I think he definitely makes the last chapter a lot easier, but I also think by the time you reach the final map, it's very possible that you will have an army that's strong enough to be able to beat the chapter without Athos. So in that sense, Athos is sort of average with respect to, the entirety of the game. Maybe a well-trained Pent or Canas or even Nino can do a better job than Athos at some stuff. So because of that, because of their ability to do just as well as Athos, while also having contributed during the rest of the game, I'm just going to leave him at B. For now. Okay, that was a very important unit that we talked about at the very beginning. Now maybe let's go for a bit less relevant unit in the scheme of, Fire Emblem Blazing Sword. So here's Bartre. Bartre, a unit that's playable in both FE7 and FE6, gets handed to you on the very first chapter in Eliwood mode, and like on the second chapter of Hector mode, I'm pretty sure. So very early game unit. The problem is that even though his availability is almost perfect, he doesn't have the stats to back it up. He's sort of slow. He's supposedly faster than his counterpart Dorcas, but his starting speed is actually so bad that even if he has a better growth, it doesn't. You will have to invest a lot into Bartre for him to get speedy, or even for him to stop being at danger of being doubled. And he has axes as a weapon type. As I've said, hand axes are pretty powerful in FE7, but I feel like the units that can make the best use out of them are maybe the heroes and the paladins. So Bartre kind of doesn't provide you with the mobility that a flyer or a cavalry does, focuses entirely on doing huge amounts of damage, because that's kind of what the fighter and warrior are going for, but maybe falls a little bit short of one-shotting. Also isn't fast enough to double, and yeah, yes, you can't expect Bartre to have better combat than units that are already providing you with better stuff like mobility, like rescue dropping capabilities. So Bartre really is not that great. I guess that's the point. I obviously don't want to put him that low because availability is still valuable, so I don't think I'm going to put him in F tier, yes, because Bartre is at least helpful during the first 3 or 4 chapters of the game where you need like every hand on deck. So I'm just going to put him on D tier for now. He's definitely... I haven't personally used him, but I've tried Dorcas, and I have to assume that Bartre's performance throughout the game is very similar. And yeah, Dorcas wasn't too impressive. If you want to have a unit with high strength defeating other enemies, there are better options than Dorcas. Alright, now Canas. Canas is a very interesting unit because of what I mentioned before when we were talking about Athos, sorry, which is the ability to use Dark Magic. Dark Magic might seem like a slightly inferior option to the Anima Magic that most mages have, but it does allow you to use interesting tomes with secondary effects. One of them is Nosferatu. Nosferatu is sort of heavy, that's true, but the ability to drain the enemy's HP and get it for yourself might give you a chance to, you know, survive something you otherwise wouldn't be able to. Then there's also Luna. As I've said before, Luna being able to ignore enemy defenses is incredibly strong against bosses, which are normally like, you know, bundles of stats. But not only against bosses, yes, you know, gives a dark mage the ability to have better combat against other mages that tend to have good resistance, and maybe special enemies like Pegasus Knights that also tend to have good resistance. Canas comes during sort of a side quest, you know, one of those side quest characters. I'm not going to hold that against him because that side quest is optional, but I'm not going to hold obtaining Canas as part of the inconveniences of using Canas. So once we assume the fact that we are getting Canas, like he has been safely recruited, he's actually come into the game like a bit earlier than the Dread Isle, just in time to get into the boat and then do the entirety of the Dread Isle. So that's pretty decent availability. He's going to find a good amount of targets that he can combat. In my experience, you can probably expect to promote him not soon after, you know, not very not much later than the Dragon's Gate. I say in the Dragon's Gate you can expect Canas to be unpromoted, but after that you can already start thinking forward to promotion. Promoting a mage early is important because you also get the ability to train them into using staves. Overall, a pretty unique unit, pretty strong, great bonuses upon promotion. Yes, you know, I'm not going to call him a flawless unit, but I think he's among the best mages in the game. And I think just due to that availability, I would put Canas over Athos. I don't know if I want to put him in A tier, that feels like a little bit too much for me. I'm going to put him in A tier for now. But later on, maybe he descends a little bit, I don't know. For now, Canas is going on A tier. He's pretty good. He's pretty good. So I don't feel bad about that. Alright. Here's a unit I actually haven't used that much. I've tried him. So I'm going to try and formulate my thoughts based on theory, you could say, and it's Dart. Dart is a pirate. Actually the only unit you can control as a pirate, and later on promotes into a berserker. A class, a final class he shares only with Hawkeye. And I have to say the berserker class just feels a lot superior to the fighter into warrior class that Bartre and Dorcas have going on. So in the sense of the class he has, he's doing pretty well. He's he already has like C rank in access, so decently high rank. After promo you can easily expect him to get to S rank, meaning he will have like those S rank bonuses by the end of the game. Hand axes, as I said, are at an all-time high, and even if Dart doesn't have the highest constitution in the world, it's enough to wield hand axes without getting weighted down. The problem with Dart is that he's a bit fragile, in my opinion. I guess I didn't comment on the individual stats of these units. Maybe with Bartre I did. Yes, I guess depends a little bit on his growth. A bit slow, slightly tanky. Canas is also sort of slow, but it gets fixed by the promotion, so it's normally okay. And magic isn't that heavy, so you should be fine. The problem with Dart is he's supposed to be like a full offense unit, attack and speed, but that comes at the cost of two things. One is the general bulk. Even if he has good HP, you cannot normally expect Dart, I think I called him Canas earlier, you cannot expect Dart to tank that well. And the second one, and maybe most important, is that his skill is not that great, and his luck isn't either. So without good skill, without good luck, you can run into some trouble because axes are not that accurate. I still think that Dart is probably worth training, and if you really want to have an axe user, then he comes ready to go during the Dread Isle, just a little bit after Canas. So he should be serviceable. He's a serviceable unit, but it's nothing too crazy, and I think he gets largely outclassed by Hawkeye. Still, units in FE7 aren't that incredible, that strong, so I think putting him in C tier is more than enough. The pirate mobility can be fun to use at some points, during the water. If you are playing Hector mode, he can have some opportunities to use that mobility through water in Crazed Beast. That's interesting. Also in his joining chapter, he's pretty useful there going through the water. But he's not insane, so just putting him in C tier I think is fair. Alright, now what's going to happen to Dorcas? Because Dorcas, I think I've kind of discussed Dorcas already by talking about Bartre. He joins at the same time as Bartre, and I guess I should also use Dorcas to discuss something important, which is limb mode bonuses. So if you have played limb mode, there exists the possibility that you have trained up some unit, and then when you play Eliwood or Hector mode, you get those units back with increased stats. We are going to assume that you didn't play limb mode for this analysis, otherwise it would be a bit too complicated, because I would have to rank units like Kent, or like Kent, like Sain, like even to a degree Rath. I would have to rank them higher just because of all the training you can give them prior to actually getting them in the main game. I think everyone would consider Eliwood mode to be the main game. Because of that, Dorcas, let's just assume he has his starting stats in either Eliwood or Hector mode. You obtain him during one of the earliest chapters in the game. He's basically just like Bartre, and he has a sort of not promising but decent amount of speed going on. He has a very bad growth in speed, but he can do a lot of damage. a bit more fragile than Bartre. Maybe you could say even a bit less balanced in terms of growth. But if that speed somehow gets fixed a little bit, if you give him like a speed wing or something, he should be able to get going for the rest of the game. So I do think Dorcas is generally superior to Bartre, but I think that difference is just for you know, it's up to discussion. If you really value certain things that Bartre provides over the ones that Dorcas gives you, that's completely understandable. I think they are pretty similar units, same join time, same weapon type, same class path, so really it comes down to minor differences. You can consider them to be kind of equal in that sense, but I think the upper hand, in my opinion, goes to Dorcas. Okay, so I fixed up the size of this thing, and now we can continue with Eliwood. Okay. Well, that's an interesting unit to talk about, because Eliwood, I feel, gets a lot of shit, doesn't he? He gets a lot of shit. People tend to say a lot of bad things about Eliwood as a unit, and I don't know if I completely agree with all of them. First of all, let's discuss like the obvious problems with Eliwood. He's a foot unit. He doesn't get a mount. He has a sword. So just having a sword means he has no option for one to range. And he's just not incredibly strong, not incredibly fast, not incredibly tanky. At the same time, even though he doesn't have a mount for the early game, after a while he gets the option to promote. And then he basically becomes kind of a lightweight paladin with the ability to wield lances immediately. I think he also gets them at deer rank, so he's pretty good with javelins from the get-go. The mount means he suddenly has the ability to do like rescue drops for you, and his stats that were at an average line where neither of them shined too much because of the enemies in FE7 not being that strong. Suddenly when you boost them sort of equally across the board, he's doing enough damage, he has enough speed to double. So I think having an average stat line works for Eliwood, because by the time you get to the late game, he tends to have enough stats to do everything just barely. And if you give him a little bit of help, you know, and a stat booster here and there, he can even turn into a pretty solid combat unit. I have had incredibly good Eliwoods in the past, and been positively surprised about it. I've also had incredibly underwhelming Eliwoods, let's just be clear here. It depends a little bit on luck, because his stats are so average. It depends on luck whether you will get good stats or not. But he's still a force deploy in some chapters, and he has access to the rapier, which has that valuable effectiveness against armor and cavalry. So I think Eliwood, I think he's not to be underestimated. I think people tend to underestimate him a lot because they expect a lord to be just as good as, you know, Ike, for example, in Radiant Dawn is insane, Chrome is insane, Corrin is insane. Not every lord has to be them for them to shine. So Eliwood is still a good unit. He's not incredible. I would put him on low B tier, because the ability to gain a mount later on like really helps his case for you know, actually having utility. It's true that his promotion doesn't come that early, and if you're playing Eliwood mode, that promotion is even a little bit too late. But if you're playing Hector, you should normally pick Eliwood as your first promotion with the Heaven Seal, and then you basically get like a new competent paladin type unit for the rest of the game. So I think Eliwood is valuable. I really do. Okay. Now for the next one. Erk. Yeah. Erk is not that great, guys. One would think that an early game mage, with all that room to grow and with all those levels and those chapters to contribute into, would be a better, just a little bit better than Erk is. But in my experience in FE7, I feel like Erk is the face of the, magic disappointment for me in this game. Mages aren't that incredible, and Erk just has absolutely nothing going for him except for being a mage. So by the time you start getting units like Lucius, who's a bit faster, or Canas, who's a bit more hard-hitting than him, he doesn't look that good in comparison. And then Pent comes and it's just completely over. In my opinion, there's almost no chance for you to have Erk be as strong as Pent by the time you get him. So, because Pent is just going to be superior to Erk from the moment you get him, we just kind of have to assess whether Erk's contributions to the team before you get Pent are valuable enough to put him over Pent, and they just aren't, man. They just aren't. He's supposedly fast, but I feel like he falls a little bit short to be able to double some speedy enemies. He's not even good at doubling cavalry or anything. The only stat he really excels at is like skill, maybe a little bit of luck, but he doesn't have the best magic. So he depends on the enemy having low resistance for him to be able to do good damage. I can't remember Erk being able to easily one-round enemies other than, I don't know, Armor Knights. In any of the times I've used him, he's just not incredible, man. He's not incredible. Still, being the first mage you obtain has its advantages. He is still up in the discussion because of the value he provides you when you have to decide what units to deploy in a chapter. Erk normally is at least up to discussion just because of the fact that he's able to do magic, which is more than you can say of, Dorcas and Bartre in certain situations. So I think he's comparable to them and even a little bit better. I just don't think he deserves to be on the C tier, if we are being honest here. So I'm going to put him high in the D tier. That's all. Kind of the worst mage of the game for me. Just the worst mage of the game. Such a disappointment. And every time I use him, I say, like, yeah, if I invest enough during the beginning and everything. No, he's not that good during the early. He doesn't grow into that strong in the mid game, and by the time you get to the late game, there are better options. So I'm sorry, Erk, D tier through and through. Okay, now for Farina. Farina, this is an Hector mode only unit. Okay, so let's be completely clear here. Farina is really benefiting from my previously established rule of you don't have to consider the circumstances of the recruitment, because recruiting Farina is kind of a pain in the ass. You have to play the Craze Beast chapter that I mentioned earlier, and you have to pay her a considerable amount of money. I think it might be like 10k or so. And also I think you have to pay her that amount with Hector. And Hector is not the easiest unit to move around, if you know what I mean. He's heavy, so you can't really carry him with just about anyone. Farina is difficult to recruit. Now, if we already have Farina recruited, I'd say she is the best flyer in the game. Now, the thing is, she's also the last one to come. So you can't really talk about Farina as a whole during the game without taking into account, you know, all the contributions that Fiora, that Florina, that Heath have been making. She's not the last one to come, actually. There's Vaida a bit later. So in that aspect, she has Vaida beaten, obviously. Farina is incredibly speedy, very strong for a Pegasus Knight. Has a good amount of resistance, which is something that Heath is maybe lacking a little bit. Very good speed, maybe not as overkill as Florina, but still like very good. The thing is, she hasn't been doing anything for you up to the point where you get her. So in that sense, I'm a bit... I don't feel like giving her a very, very, very high spot because she hasn't done anything for you up to the point where you recruit her. In that sense, I think B tier is more than enough. Higher than Eliwood for sure. You could say that Eliwood does some stuff for you during the early game, but his main point is that he's going to grow into a strong unit during the promo, right? That promo comes just around the same time as the Farina recruitment, so and Farina clearly outshines Eliwood once you get her. So I'd say they go on par, more or less, if you know what I mean. Now against Athos, I have to admit, Athos, whatever Athos is doing for you during the last chapter in the game is probably more valuable than what Farina can do for you during her chapters in the game. So in that sense, I don't want to put her over Athos, but yeah, I think B tier is more than enough for her. And because the naming scheme in this game goes like this, and I have the characters ordered alphabetically, we will have to discuss the 3 Pegasus sisters one after the other. So we started with the latest joining, now we're going to get the second one to join, which is Fiora. Fiora joins at the same time as Dart, a little bit later I guess, because she has to like appear as an NPC and get recruited. And you know, as I said before, being a flyer, being a cavalry is just incredibly valuable in FE7, and I think Fiora might be one of the units that benefits the most from her class. Normally joining close to the mid-game means you have to have a good showing of your abilities, and Fiora is definitely able to do that. She joins with an Axe River, kind of showing you that she has some options to take care of the axes if needed. She also has good enough speed to double most enemies, access to javelins, and upon promotion she's going to get those swords that are maybe not that incredible, but at least are a lightweight option that allows her to battle axes without depending on the Axe River. So this is just a good flyer. And of course we're not even mentioning her abilities as a support unit. Just being able to rescue someone, counter away, and then drop them off beyond a pack of mountains or whatever. Good resistance as well, so she doesn't have to get worried about maybe siege magic as much as other units do. Definitely more tanky against mages than most paladins. Good combat unit, good unit to be able to skip, terrain with. Yeah, just an incredible unit overall. Almost tempted to... Yeah, in fact, I'm so tempted I'm going to do it. I'm going to put her on S tier. And this might be a little bit surprising because I never use Fiora that much, right? And this is just a fact. I've used Florina quite a lot, and I've used Farina once, but I've never used Fiora. Now, this comes basically from my understanding about what a Pegasus needs to be good, and I think Florina is just lacking the bulk. She needs the training a little bit too much, and then Farina is like on the completely opposite end of the spectrum. She has everything you want, but comes a little bit too late and maybe doesn't get to contribute as much. Fiora is in a comfortable middle ground. She doesn't need the training. She comes early enough to be useful, but late enough to not depend on the training. So yeah, I think S tier is more than justified. Fiora is definitely one of the best units in the game. For you to beat the game easily, I would say sort of requires you to either make use of Florina or Fiora. It's true that Fiora's contributions can be replaced by a well-trained Florina, but considering just the individual unit, yeah, this is a good one to have. And if you need 2 flyers during the early game, yes, you know, use both sisters. And speaking of, let's discuss the last Pegasus sister, Florina. Florina is a pretty fine unit, incredibly powerful in limb mode, obviously, because you don't get other options for flyers, and that gave me the impression that she might just be the best unit in the game by the time I played Eliwood mode for the first time, because I was coming out of limb mode, and I had a well-trained Florina just wrecking up everything she went up against. Now, the reality is a little bit different. Florina is not that incredible if you haven't played limb mode. Her starting stats are not crazy. They are good enough, they are serviceable, and they definitely make her an easier unit to train than other bosses like Erk or the fighters are. And being a Pegasus is also like a great advantage. But she can depend a little bit too much on that training. If you get bad levels, you're kind of fucked. And if you start getting those, you know, no strength in like 5 levels in a row that Florina is kind of weak to, then you're left with sort of a weak unit. So I think she depends a little bit on that luck. Still, first player in the game means a lot of contributions in terms of, you know, rescuing people, dropping people, going over mountains. Already useful in like her joining chapter. In her joining chapter, she's pretty incredible at just getting anyone to get closer to the link group as soon as possible. Ignoring terrain is great. Javelin use is also very good for chipping, and well, basically everything I said to Fiora applies to Florina in a bit of a lesser degree. So yeah, just that incredible availability puts her on A tier for me. So I guess my ordering of the Pegasus girls is pretty clear. And I do think she is also better than Canas. Canas is a pretty fine unit, but you know, just Luna and the healing utility and everything doesn't come close to what a flyer can do in FE7. So Florina, high in A tier, I'm probably going to stay there, like on the highest point of A tier for a while. I'd say that is pretty fair. Okay, now going for a pretty interesting unit, Geitz. So there's 3 units in this game that get the fighter into warrior class path, I'm pretty sure. We've already discussed 2 of them, and the third one is Geitz. Now Geitz, once again, just like Farina, just like Canas, let's forget for a moment that you have to get into the Linus version of how is it called? Forfang offense? Yeah, pretty sure. You have to get the Linus version of Forfang offense, which means you have to train your lords so that the sum of their levels is higher than 50. I'm pretty sure it goes like that. Meaning, getting Geitz is not that easy, and the chapter you have to play after you get him is sort of difficult. Leaving that aside, Geitz is a pretty solid unit, and him being pre-promoted into a warrior gives him a lot of value that Dorcas and Bartre, and even units like Dart, simply don't have. First of all, he has a much more respectable bow rank. I think it's C tier, although it might be a little bit higher, but I think it's C tier. And he has a very good axe rank. He has decent speed, he's tanky enough to take on some enemies, and he has very good strength. So you're kind of getting a second Hawkeye with bow utility, maybe not as tanky as Hawkeye, but I would also argue that with a bit more of potential to the future. Not like Geitz is a trainee or anything, but his growths are nothing to scoff at. So if you ever try the Linus version of Forfang Offense, if you train your lords up so much that you get to that version, I think there's an argument for you to be made about at least trying Geitz, seeing what all the fuss is about. He doesn't join that late. That chapter isn't happening that late. It's at least earlier than the whole. I think he has one chapter before the. No, I was going to say one chapter before Hawkeye. It's exactly the opposite. It's one chapter after Hawkeye. So he does come a little bit later than I was thinking. That availability does hurt him a little bit, but aside from availability, there's nothing wrong with Geitz. Perfectly capable combat unit, doesn't really have the mobility or the, or the ignoring terrain or the utility. You're just talking about a pure combat unit, and the only thing close to utility is maybe the bow uses, because most bow users in this game aren't that great, so maybe having Geitz and not having to depend on someone like Rebecca feels good for you. I'm going to put Geitz in C tier. Even after everything I've said, I think like Farina clearly deserves to be a tier over him, because she's like kind of in the same situation but in a vastly superior class. I think Eliwood has much better contributions during the story. I do think this guy is better than Dart because of Dart's accuracy problems and because of him also being that frail. But yeah, high in C tier, like the face of the average, that's pretty good for me. Alright, next is Guy. Guy, also known as Guy for some people, but I'm pretty sure the correct pronunciation is Guy. Yes, like the character in Final Fantasy II. So Guy is a pretty strange unit. As someone, and I mentioned this before, that loves Binding Blade, I tend to maybe overvalue sword fighters because of Root Hair being so incredible, because of Fear being like one of the best trainees in FE6, and because of Karel sort of being like the Athos of FE6. However, because of everything I've discussed before, hand axes and javelins are kind of the weapon you want to be using for large stretches of the game to get rid of groups of low quality enemies. And Guy being a foot-bound sword fighter is hurting him a lot in that regard. He has potential to grow into a very fast unit that hits pretty hard with a critical bonus, not as strong as the one in Binding Blade. Instead of plus 30, it's plus 15 critical, but still with a killing edge, it should be, around 70% chance to get a critical on every hit. So he's a good combat unit, but if the enemies you are facing have some range weaponry mixed in between, he suddenly becomes a lot more ineffective, and we just have to be aware of that. He has good availability, comes pretty early, I think like 4th, 5th chapter, you can recruit him with Matthew. Immediately from the get-go, he shows off the ability to, easily dispose of axe fighters, doubling enemies that maybe were a little bit too fast for anyone else in your army to double, but being stuck with swords even after promotion is not great. And because of that, I cannot put you over C tier without lying to myself. I think his combat during the early game is better than Eliwood's, but I think after the promo, not getting much stronger is just a big problem. So I have to put you here. Yeah, I don't know what to say. I have to put you here. I think Dart has more potential to you than you. Even if I don't love the accuracy problems, just the ability to use hand axes is better than anything you can offer. And you're still a unit that is sort of a trainee, not that much, but you have to be trained. So yeah, taking all that into account, Guy is going into the C tier, and that's it. Okay, now starting with the age, we have Harken. Harken is one of 2 units you can recruit during Pale Flower of Darkness. Doesn't matter if you picked the Kenneth or the Yerme side of the chapter. That is not relevant. And normally recruiting him means you have to play the chapter a little bit slower, which I guess in a sense also means that the game considers him to be like a stronger alternative than Karel, who's the other unit you can recruit there, but they are mutually exclusive. I would agree with that statement. Like, I do think Harken is stronger than Karel, and overall I think Harken is a pretty good combat unit. No, scratch that. I think Harken is a pretty incredible combat unit. B rank in swords, B rank in axes. You know, the ability to use hand axes from the get-go, being very good with them. He also he's the character that comes with a brave sword, right? Like the only brave sword you get in the game, so that has to be valuable. And I'm not saying yes because he's the only one that can use it, but he's definitely one of the best units to use it with. If you recruit Harken, he will probably prove to be a very valuable unit during Battle Before Dawn as well, which comes just immediately after. So yeah, I think Harken is a very good combat unit, no discussion, and probably like among the best combat units that doesn't include, you know, cavalry or flyers. In fact, in terms of pure combat, he's probably better than most paladins and flyers and whatever. The thing with Harken is the availability. That is all that has to be discussed. Pale Flower of Darkness is a little bit too late. We were already penalizing like Geitz and Farina for their join time. This is even later. So as much as Harken is a very good combat unit, I don't want to put him too high because of him not being able to do those incredible contributions for very, very, very long. I'd say B tier has kind of become my place for incredible units that don't contribute for that much. I think that Harken beats Athos in terms of availability and beats Farina in terms of combat, to the point where I think Harken is better than both of them, and I'm going to leave him there. It's a bit difficult for me to rank Harken because late game units, you know, you always tend to think maybe if I train this other unit that I got during the early game for long enough, they will get to be better than Harken. But Harken being so powerful without the need to be trained has to be, you know, added value. And for a unit like him to be recruited and immediately be normally like one of your MVPs during Battle Before Dawn, it's just incredible. It's just incredible. So yeah, high B tier, almost tempted to put him into A tier, but he's just a little bit too late for me to get him in there. Okay. And another unit that in a sense is similar to Harken in my mind is Hawkeye. If Harken is like the ready-to-go carry for Battle Before Dawn, Hawkeye has always been the ready-to-go carry for Orphan Offense in my mind. If you don't really have the strongest combat units, by the time you get into the, the burn part of the story. Hawkeye will prove to be incredible. And if your units are already good enough, then maybe Hawkeye seems a little bit superfluous. But he's still like a solid axe user. With the Sword River, he can do incredibly well against Linus in the Forfang offense, and against many sword fighters. In fact, like he has a chance to one-shot. Speaking about one-shots, he is a berserker, meaning he gets a plus 15 critical bonus just continuously. So there's always a chance for him to get a lucky critical, even with a hand axe, and completely nuke an enemy. Being able to put him into mountains is also pretty valuable. And as I said, for example, in Forfang offense, that can prove to be very funny. He's a solid unit, and I think he continues to be a solid unit for the rest of the game. And I remember having used Hawkeye like very successfully, even during Victory or Death. So there's no complaining about Hawkeye in terms of combat. The only true discussion is he doesn't have the best mobility, and he's a bit too big for a unit, so he's a bit difficult to carry around and to drop. Meaning you sometimes, if you want to use Hawkeye a lot, you have to follow him and you have to wait a little bit for him to catch up. If your army is like composed of very fast, very high mobility units. Hawkeye is very, very, very good, but I don't think he deserves to be in S tier, is what I'm saying. I think high A tier, over Canas, definitely, over Florina. That I don't know. Hawkeye is also not that tanky. He's tanky. He can take like 2 or 3 enemies. But you cannot expect him to clear like a group of 6 enemies or something. That's a little bit too much. He depends on the dodge that he gets from mountains. So in indoors maps, he's not crazy. I'm going to consider that the utility Florina gives as a flyer during the early chapters in the game is more valuable than the combat that Hawkeye gives from, Forfang offense to later on. Still a pretty incredible unit. That's why he's in A tier after all. Okay. Now, Heath. Okay, guys. I have to, come out of the closet here and say what I truly think about Heath. I don't like him. I know I said that I wasn't going to let personal feelings get in the way of the review, but I don't like Heath that much. I feel like the Pegasi are much more interesting to use. I find Heath to be a bit too slow. I think him being so frail to magic at the beginning is lame. I think him being level 7, so, him needing to get levels before promo is also sort of lame. And yet I continuously hear things about Heath being the best flyer in the game. I'm going to have to apply a little bit of my personal bias here. I don't think he's the best flyer in the game. I think that title goes to Fiora. Easily. This guy comes in the, Kinship's Bond. So that means like 2 chapters after Dragon's Gate. By that time, Fiora has been helping you for, the Dread Isle, the Paralog after that. She also was probably instrumental during Dragon's Gate if you have been training her a little bit to kill like packs of mages or stuff like that. Heath joins you during Kinship's Bond and expects to become like your preferred trainee. And yes, I understand, Wyverns are very strong. And after FE6, they probably noticed that, Milady was a little bit too strong. So they decided to tone down the guy that is effectively like the Milady archetype of this game. And yet, I'm disappointed with Heath. I understand why they made him a little bit weaker than Milady, but I kind of would prefer him if he was overkill strong. Flying utility is very good. being tanky and being strong is very good, but I really dislike the fact that you have to give him so much training. So there's no way for me that he's going in the S tier, even though I've heard a lot of discussion about him being S tier. A tier, of course, is out of discussion. After all, he's a wyvern. The availability, even if I just complained about it, because I feel like he misses Dragon's Gate, and that for me means you're a mid-game unit. Even if that happens, I also can't lie to myself. He's there for a large chunk of the game. Much better availability than these guys. Definitely better than Canas, but I wouldn't put him over Hawkeye. It's that simple. Even if Hawkeye joins a little bit later, at least with Hawkeye I know that by the time I get Hawkeye, he's ready to go. And he's going to be one of my best carries for Fang offense. Meanwhile, Heath joins before Arcadia, and yet during Arcadia I can't depend on him. I have to be dodging the mages, and I have to be, you know, making a conscious effort to train him instead of being able to use him to my benefit. So yeah, A tier, still very respectable. Like, you cannot say I put him low, but not higher than A tier for me. Sorry if that's a little bit more biased than you are used to, but well, this is my channel, so I can say whatever the fuck I want. Ooh, okay. Continuing with the age, we have Hector. Yeah, Hector is good, right? I think that's a well-known truth, an accepted truth among the Fire Emblem community's discussion that has been had for years and years and years. Hector is an armor, supposedly, and yet his mobility is not that disappointing during the early game. He's supposed to be weak to magic, and yet the ability to use hand axes means he's better against mages than Eliwood is for the early game. He's supposed to be slow, but him getting so much speed on promotion means he can actually have better chances at doubling enemies than Eliwood, or even Lyn at some points. So Hector is just exploiting every trick that there is to turn a unit that shouldn't be that good at doing something into good. And the result is an incredible unit that has probably the best combat in the game, or at least among the best combat. A personal weapon effective against cavalry and armor that is much better than the rapier in any aspect, because you want to use it against land-wielding enemies, so obviously an axe would be better. As I said, access to hand axes. If you're playing Eliwood mode, the promotion comes pretty early. If you're playing Hector mode, it's true that he gets stuck without the promo for a while. There is one big problem with Hector though, and that is the movement. Moving Hector around is a bit of a pain. It just goes like that. Hector is a big guy, a big burly guy, and that is very beneficial when you are wielding axes because you don't get weighted down by them, but it also means that he's difficult to rescue. And when you promote some of the Pegasi, when you promote some of the Wyverns, they suddenly become unable to carry Hector, and that's a problem. And then Hector promotes and also gains a good amount of constitution, so yeah. Basically the golden standard for a good unit to rescue drop with in this game is, are they able to carry promoted Hector? So that should tell you something. Moving Hector around is also incredibly important if you're in Hector mode, because some chapters aren't able to finish without you seizing the throne with Hector. So yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem, and a problem we have to acknowledge. I still think that Hector is a very good unit. He has very good combat. He has basically perfect availability for Hector mode and almost perfect for Eliwood mode. And he performs well during the early game, but also stays a strong option during the late game, even getting a personal axe. That is one of the easiest ways to defeat the final boss if you're not using Luna. So, taking all that into account, Hector has a lot of great things going, and just in my opinion a single bad going against him. That already makes him better than Florina. In fact, I can't deny Hector his place as an S tier unit. I'm sorry if I seemed like I was going to give him a lower placement, but I think he's an S tier unit. But I am not going to put him over Fiora. I think Fiora's utility is better, and I think even if her combat is not incredible, she makes up for it with, you know, the utility she can provide to other people during the game. Meanwhile, Hector is kind of out for himself. He just takes out a lot of enemies, and that can even become a little bit bad for you, because if Hector over levels, you know, gets up to level 20, then for a while during the mid to late game, before he gets his promo, he might not be like the best target for experience. You don't want a unit that's level 20 and has no promotion available to be getting all that experience, right? So that's a bit conflicting with Hector at times. He's still an incredible unit, and if you are playing FE7, like, you probably should deploy him because of story reasons and because of force deployment reasons. I don't think I've seen a single person ever try to beat the game without using Hector. So yeah, just very good unit, and S tier kind of goes to prove that. Okay, is this? Yes, this is the first paladin we discuss. Okay, there's a lot of paladins in this game, 6 of them, no, 5 of them. And yet the first one we discuss is Isadora, maybe the weirdest of the bunch. Alright, so Isadora is a solid unit. And I'm tired of pretending she isn't. I hear a lot of people saying bad things about Isadora. You know, her combat is not as incredible as it should be. Her availability is also like not crazy. She comes in Kinship's Bond, I already said. Heath coming in Kinship's Bond does feel to me like she's maybe a little bit too late. Then immediately after Kinship's Bond, she gets to go into Arcadia. Obviously, that's not a good showing for any cavalry, because, you know, desert maps are just not good for cavalry. But I think you just cannot understate how important being in the paladin class is for a unit. Okay, so Isadora is not insane. Isadora is not the best paladin in the game. Isadora is not the best fighting unit in the game. But she still can do a lot of things that other units cannot even dream of doing. 8 movement on base is incredible, and she's already promoted, so she doesn't need competition with other cavalry for the promo. She's already promoted. Honestly, her speed is pretty good, and the only reason why her combat isn't getting a little bit better is because she's not... she hasn't been trained like 1 or 2 levels more. So I feel like Isadora is in the discussion for me where giving her a stat booster, I feel, fixes so many of her problems that it can be used as an argument. I normally don't like when people tell me, okay, this unit is incredible for me because I gave them like 2 energy rings and 2 speed wings. With Isadora, I promise you, if you give her either a body ring or a speed wing, a single one of them, she will be much better in combat. And combat for a paladin means being able to counter mages and range units successfully with a paladin, yeah, with a javelin, Isadora also comes with a short spear, pretty useful if you need just a little bit more damage than the javelin. Very good ranking in swords that allows her to use the silver sword on base. Not as powerful as the silver lance, but still, you know, very cool option for damage. She's not like a map clearer or anything, she's not absolutely insane, but she's a very, very, very serviceable paladin that can still do a lot of rescue drop operations, that can still do a lot for your army, and can do so at basically no cost. Because she comes promoted, she's ready to go. And as I said, if you invest just a little bit, you might make her, you know, a lot better. So I feel like investing a stat booster in her kind of returns the investment in a big way. All of this is to say that I feel like Isadora is a little bit underrated. I feel like she's better than people give her credit, but I still am not going to lie to you. I don't think she's up there with the B tier, with the A tier guys. I think she's a B tier unit. Harken is definitely more relevant, like in the large scheme of things. I can picture playing the entirety of FE7 without using Isadora more easily than I can without using Harken for Battle Before Dawn. Better than Farina, that's for sure, because the availability is just that much better. Athos is really where it's at. And once again, I think Athos has her beat, more or less for the same reasons as Harken. Athos is just so instrumental in the final chapter. And Isadora can simply... She's never going to be the star of your team, but she can only hope to be like your second or third paladin that comes with no investment at all. And, you know, you deploy her to be able to carry someone ahead and to dispose of some pesky enemies, to hold up some reinforcements, and then she's already doing her job. So in that sense, I feel like she's a pretty good unit and people just don't give her credit for all that she can do. Okay. Next is Jaffar. Jaffar. Very interesting unit here. Okay. So Jaffar is an assassin. The assassin class was introduced in this game for the first time, and it's a promotion for thieves. If you decide to promote any of your other thieves, Legault, Matthew, into an assassin, you probably won't get a unit as good as Jaffar. He has incredibly good strength for an assassin, and he is, in a way, afflicted with a lot of things that should kill him as a unit, you know, because he's foot-bound and he can only use swords. The big thing going for Jaffar is basically his speed. He's so speedy that he's probably going to outspeed a trained-up Lin by the time you recruit him, and be one of the most valuable options you have against the speedy enemies you can run into in the late game. I can also mention, you know, the ability to trigger Silencer and to suddenly kill an enemy if he gets a critical, but I think that's a little bit too luck reliant. He does get a good boost in critical, and the boost in critical is just what makes him valuable. He has good combat. He has enough speed to not get doubled easily, and he has enough bulk to not get one shot or even two shot easily. That's basically all you can expect from Jaffar. He's a late tuning unit, a bit later than Harken even, joins after Battle Before Dawn, and does require, you know, some things to happen for you to recruit him. But imagine you're able to recruit Jaffar, like, you know, let's take that out of the equation. If you do recruit Jaffar, he's going to prove to be a good combat unit. The problem again is the availability. The availability, yes, is an incredible. The combat maybe isn't as incredible as it should be for his joining time. So once again, B tier through and through. We've kind of been using B tier for those units that are good but maybe not as good. Are very good but maybe not good enough to justify their late joining time. That's what I was going for. Still, the combat is pretty great. Like, I have to put him over Isadora, but not over Athos. I'd say that's pretty fair. I'm tempted to put Eliwood a bit lower. I hope I get a large influx of average units to fill all these categories with, because I feel like I'm putting a lot of people on the higher tiers. So please let me get some slightly worse units soon, please. Okay. Next is Karel. One of my favorite characters in Fire Emblem in general, and basically the counterpart for Harken to be recruited in the Pale Flower of Darkness chapter. He's a swordmaster with a good amount of speed, decent amount of strength, and a very good amount of skill, but he has two glaring flaws. One of them is tankiness. Tankiness is non-existent, and the other is, well, being a swordmaster. Being a swordmaster, guys, it's not good. It's not good. I've already talked about this while we were discussing Gi, but not having access to hand access to javelins during the late game is very punishing, and the only units that can get away with it are units like Jaffar that have outstanding stats to the point where it doesn't really matter that you can only do one rage combat, because at least I know you can do that like incredibly well and be much faster than basically anyone at that point. Karel is not that incredibly fast. He is very fast by virtue of, being a swordmaster and all that, but not enough to justify his use. And when you compare him to Harken, stat by stat, you can see that Harken is already winning that aspect. If you even add to that the fact that Harken is able to use access and Karel isn't, then the comparison is obvious. He's not that good. He's a bit too late joining. He's not in the best class. So even though he's supposed to be like a filling unit that should be able to help you during the late chapters of the game, I don't see him being that valuable. I still feel like he can be put in low C tier. Low C tier is fine enough with me, but I have to say, I think that Gi is better than Karel. And yeah, I do understand that Gi requires training. And training a unit is of course very annoying, especially when they aren't incredible. But the resulting Gi should be able to outclass Karel. And if you take that into account, and also the fact that Gi has been able to do something for you during the early game, then it should be obvious. Gi is just a direct upgrade to Karel. Karel is only there because, getting a decent unit with no investment at all also has to be taken into account. And to finish off with the trio of swordmasters, we have Karla, Karel's sister. And Karla is a unit I've never had the displeasure of using, but everything I've heard about her gives me the idea that I know exactly where to place her. On F tier. And let me discuss why in detail. Every inconvenience I've said about Karel and about Gi applies to Karla. The class is not good, being footbound is not incredible, being sword, only able to fight with swords is even worse. But Karla, if that wasn't enough, also doesn't have the best stats. And she joins incredibly late, and by incredibly late I mean like she's the third to last unit to join or something like that. She basically joins during battle preparations, which means you can only use her for victory or death and the final chapter. The only units that join later than her are Renault and Athos, and at least those units provide you with some utility, but Karla is purely a combat unit. So if you're a combat unit, you either have good stats or you are not useful. Karla doesn't have good stats, ergo, she is not useful. I'm not even taking into account the fact that recruiting her is apparently like incredibly contrived and it requires you to like get Bartre to level 5 promoted. So it's an interesting recruitment, and I'd be lying if I said that I hate Karla because, you know, as a big fan of Karel as a character, I think that Karla is also an interesting character by default. But as a unit, it doesn't get much worse than that. Yes, she's not good. She's not good, guys. If you want to trade her, fine by me. But as I discussed at the beginning, this is supposed to frank how valuable that unit would be for you in, you know, while playing the game. These are units that you might notice the lack of if you try to beat the game without them. I don't think anyone can say that if they don't use Karla, they really feel like they should be deploying Karla there. Karla being in your team or not at the end of the game is completely irrelevant. I guess that's the long and short of it. Oh, finally more paladins. Okay, we get going with Kent. Kent has proven to be pretty good for me in the past, but that's because both times I played Limb mode before, and he's one of those units that, you know, grows pretty well into Limb mode, and then when you recruit him in Eliwood or Hector mode, he's decent there. Unfortunately, if you didn't play Limb mode, his stats fall a little bit shorter than I would like, but he's still a pretty competent unit just by virtue of being a paladin. Being a paladin is incredible, having access to javelins is incredible. The stats might not be crazy, but in the competition for a Night Crest, I would say that Kent is probably like one of your top choices. And if you're not using Oswin, he might honestly be the top choice. So I kind of... Okay. I'm going to do this for like kind of symmetry's sake. We're going to lower Eliwood into the highest in C tier, because that's just... I think that's fair. I think these units do perform a lot better than Eliwood. I think putting Eliwood in C tier is fine. And I'm going to put Kent in B tier. And I'm going to put him here. Over Athos, yes, over Athos. The availability is much better. And I understand that Kent's joining stats are not crazy, but if you just give him a little bit of love, he should be able to do a lot for you. So in that sense, honestly, I feel like I might be putting him even a bit too low. Like maybe he's an A tier, but yeah, no, B tier is enough. I guess B tier is enough. I don't want to put him any higher. Honestly, the problem might be that, yeah, Harken is low. Harken is the one that should be in A tier. Even if he joins very, very late, he contributes too much to the army for me to put him any lower. So yeah, Harken goes higher. Harken and Eliwood being in the same tier never made any sense at all. So now that I think about it, this is much better. And yeah, I appreciate Kent. I appreciate him, you know, having paladin movement, having rescue drop capabilities, having access to javelins, to hand access on promo, And it's true that the competition for the Night Crest is sort of tight, but as I said, Kent should be one of your primary choices for the promo. And because of all those contributions, after you promote him, he should be at least comparable to Isadora. So early game plus being sort of like Isadora means just a bit better than Isadora. It's that simple. Alright. Starting with the L, we go into Legault territory. Legault is an interesting unit, no doubt. So he's a thief. Thieves are a difficult bunch to rank, not just in this tier list, but in any tier list. And Legault is no exception. So he's decent at doing what a thief is supposed to do, which is opening doors, opening chests, stealing some items from the enemies. And when you are just out to do that, your ability as a fighter doesn't really come into question. I did try to promote Legault into an assassin in the past, and I found him to be lacking in terms of combat. Even if Legault has the upper hand against Matthew, which is like his direct competition for, assassin promo, I honestly think none of them should be promoted ever, because they lose the ability to steal, and any of the stat boost and any of the, silencer crits that could maybe grant you a kill are not going to be as valuable as just being able to steal some vulneraries from a rando. A thief should be focused on utility, and Legault is able to provide you with that utility while also having decent enough stats to not get one-shot. In fact, his performance is sort of reminiscent of Astol in Binding Blade. The thing is that Astol was also a bit more valuable in his game because of FE6 having no droppable items. Everything has to be either stolen or bought. So I think Legault is good. I think availability is a very, very, very big matter for a thief, because it's not only what you can steal, but also for how long you can steal. So in that sense, he is a bit worse than Matthew, because there are items that only Matthew can steal because Legault simply wasn't available. You recruit Legault in Dragon's Gate, so he's there for like a bit more than half of the game. He's a pretty decent thief. There's not much more to be said. I guess I just have to consider whether being a decent thief puts you in C tier or in B tier. I think B tier is not composed of average units. At this point, B tier is composed of decent units, of units you actually want to join your army, to be a part of every deploy. So Legault is only going to be deployed if there's anything to steal. In that sense, I think he deserves to be in C tier. The utility he provides makes him better than these guys, in my opinion. And his combat is also... Honestly, his combat is not that different from Karel's after Assassin promo, if we are being honest here. Karel is, of course, a bit better, but maybe even considerably better, but with the added utility, I would put him over Karel, over Guy. I do think that Dart and Geitz are a bit too strong to be under Legault, but I'm going to put Legault there. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Maybe I'm giving him a little bit too much. If you think so, please tell me, but I think this is fair. Okay. Kind of forgot about you. Louise. Okay. Louise is an interesting unit. She joins in a chapter whose name I can't ever remember. It's the chapter with the, Baida with the Uber Spear and all that. We know the chapter is the chapter where you get the Heaven Seal. and she joins together with Pent. She has A ranking bows, I'm pretty sure, and she has an starting support of A with Pent. Meaning Louise is at her best when she's being used together with Pent, while Pent is pretty incredible on his own, so if you use him with Louise he's even better, but he doesn't depend on her that much. That reliability issue, you know, having to have Pent close for her to get better combat, bothers me a little bit, but at the same time you don't get much better options for bow users than Louise. Basically there's Rath. Rath is the only other bow user I would consider to be clearly superior to Louise, because she clearly outclasses Rebecca, Will, and even to a degree Geitz and the Warriors, if you want to see it like that. There's not a lot of good bow users in the game, so being able to use the silver bow on base and one-shotting flyers and all that is good. She's pretty fast, she has a chance to get criticals because of being a sniper that gets even better with killer bows. She can use the longbow to hit enemies from afar, something that, you know, is bow utility and pretty valuable at that. She's a good combat unit, and one that comes into your army with basically no investment needed. Still, she's a bow unit, so, you know, not being able to retaliate against a fucking sword is bad enough that I can't put you in this tier, you know, without feeling dirty. So for that reason alone, you're going the highest in C tier. You're going to be like the one that sets the difference between a good unit and a middling unit for me. These units are good. Louise is where it starts having some serious problems. In fact, in a way, I think Geitz is clearly better than Louise, yeah. If I compare their performances, so yeah, Geitz is going to be over you, but you're going to be over Dart. Yeah, actually, Louise, there's some other glaring issues, like she's not that incredibly strong either, like she depends on criticals a little bit too much for my liking, and she's a bit fragile. She's very good at combat, like she's very good at defeating enemies from afar, but if you can't keep the enemies afar, she can struggle a little bit. So yeah, let's just put her there. C tier is good enough, pretty high for a bow user, like bow users are not great in this game, so I think this is pretty fair. Okay, next is, Lowen. Now that's an interesting unit, Lowen. I feel like Lowen gets a lot of shit in the comparison against other cavalry, and I get it, right? When you are going to decide your army, if you are like doing a bit of a pre-check of every unit in the game, maybe you just like, you see every cavalry available, you see that Lowen is sort of bad compared to the rest, and you think to yourself, okay, so if I'm going to use a cavalry, it shouldn't be this guy. Nothing further from the truth, because Lowen has a lot of things going for him that are, yes, very good and should be, you know, taken into account when ranking him. The first of all being availability. Okay, so he has the same availability as Marcus. That means perfect availability in Eliwood mode and only missing the first chapter in Hector. Right? That's just incredible. Also, his combat might not be insane like Marcus's, but he's still pretty good at combat and arguably like better than Eliwood, better than Bartre and Dorcas, better than even against some enemies he might prove to have enough speed to double. Biggest problem with Lowen is as time goes on he has a bit of a poor speed growth, so he can stay kind of slow and he can start struggling doubling some enemies. So you either get lucky with his speed or he's going to be become like sort of a middling combat unit. But if you value cavalry for their contributions in terms of utility, in terms of rescue and dropping and you know, crossing large amounts of planes while carrying a unit and then dropping them off somewhere, Lowen is able to provide that for you, and very early on. So I think for that reason alone, Lowen is B tier for me. I'm going to make a statement here. I think Lowen is B tier. I do think he's the worst paladin. I'm not going to discuss that. I think Isadora is better. I think Isadora requiring no investment and being, you know, that fast and that you know, having high ranks by the time you get her is much better than a trained up Lowen normally, and also Lowen requires the training. His contributions get a bit overshadowed by Marcus being able to do everything but much better. But that doesn't make Lowen into a bad unit. It simply means that he loses when compared to other paladins. Paladin is still the best class in the game, so being the worst paladin still gets you in the average. And I think he's better than Farina, to be honest. Farina just isn't there for a very, very, very long time. Lowen is able to contribute for a very long time. Yes, under Isadora is where I would put him. I would say this is pretty fair, and probably more than most people would give Lowen. Okay, next is Lucius. Alright, Lucius. So, with Lucius we have to come back again to the discussion we had previously about Erk. Mages in this game, they just aren't it. They just aren't it. And Lucius gets stuck before promo with, in my opinion, the worst type of magic there is in this game, which is light magic. Light magic, contrary to the name, is a bit heavier than anima magic, so he might struggle doubling a little bit. More like he would struggle doubling if it wasn't for the fact that Lucius is very fast. He supposedly has like a good, much better magic growth than other mages, but it takes a long time to catch up. So, in my opinion, he's clearly much inferior to Canas and even to Erk in terms of output, but he compensates by being pretty fast and being able to double enemies. So his performance is sort of comparable to Canas and to Erk. He does have one very, very, very important thing going for him that makes him better than them, and that's the promotion. The bonus, the stat bonuses when you promote from monk to bishop are decent, just like the ones from mage to sage. But you also get a C rank in staves. So suddenly you turn from a mage that was, you know, pretty decent at using light magic into a mage that is also immediately able to use up to C rank staves. That's a pretty cool boost to your utility, and I think one that that just makes Lucius better than Erk. Even if the availability is slightly worse than Erk's, we also just have to take into account the fact that he gets those staves on promo, and that makes him into a valuable staff user for the game. I kind of want to swap him for Karel, to be honest, because I think he deserves to be on C tier. But maybe that's going a bit too far. No, Karel being lower is okay. You being higher maybe is a bit too much. Let's leave it like this. Yeah. Just getting C rank in staves on promo is so great, because what every mage is aiming for, every unpromoted mage is aiming for in this game, is to try and get their promo as soon as possible to start training staves. Lucius can focus a little bit more on you know, staying back, building a good amount of stats, and then on promo he's still going to be ahead of Canas or Erk, theoretically. So in that sense, I feel like he's a very good support unit, kind of masked as a combat mage for the early game. It's a bit of a weird way to get a support unit, because clearly dedicated support units like Priscilla or even Serra are better at doing that job, but you know, he's good at it, and it's not like I'm putting him higher than D tier. I'm just saying that because of that I feel like he's better than Erk. Alright, Lyn. So here is Lyn, the third lore, and probably one of the most controversial units in FE7. There's people that swear by Lyn, that say she's one of the best units and that you just don't understand. There's also other people that say that Lyn is close to the worst unit that has, you know, ever existed in the Fire Emblem series. I think there's some truths in what the second group are saying. I do think that Lyn is not that great. I think that Lyn is vastly inferior to Eliwood, and with Eliwood already being a middling unit, that's a problem. She is fast, that's undeniable, but she's also very weak. Starting strength is horrible, the strength growth is also very bad, and it's true she's going to get a good amount of strength on the promo, but the problem is that the Lyn promo tends to be the last one to happen, because if you are playing Hector mode, you probably prefer to promote Eliwood first, and if you are playing Eliwood mode, you probably prefer to promote Hector first. She has to compete with two clearly superior units for the promo, and the other units are either getting a good amount of stats and better, you know, more room to grow in the case of Hector, or amount and fucking javelins in the case of Eliwood. Meanwhile, Lyn is coming into that discussion saying, okay guys, can you please let me promote? I will get the ability to use the bows. Yeah, it's not insane. It's true that the long bows on promo have some utility, and as I said, she gets some bonuses for strength, but she kind of also suffers from her promo, because her promo doesn't give a speed. So by the time you promote her, the highest her speed can be is 20. 20 speed is not that incredible by the time you promote Lyn, so she's sort of held back by her promo bonuses. Meanwhile, Hector is getting the absolute opposite. His stats are solid as fuck, and he's suddenly getting a speed boost that was sort of needed to become even a bigger monster. I do think that Lyn is a middling unit. I think she gets a lot of shit, and I think some of that shit sometimes comes together with the opinions people have of her as a character. I don't think we have to be fair. We don't have to do that. But you know, not being able to promote early, being forced to use swords for the early game, not having good strength, not being tanky, not having good constitution, so even your speed is put into question at times when using heavy swords, like, I don't know, a blade. She's not good. And because of that, D tier, she has to be D tier. I think she's superior to you. I honestly think she's superior to Karel, like, I'm not going to be stupid here, she's superior to Karel. But do I think she's better than Lucius? That's where the debate is for me. Okay, also for symmetry reasons, and because we haven't even discussed them once, like we clearly know they are bad, I'm going to lower Dorcas and Bartre into the F tier. Yeah, that's right. That's right. I'm going to put some more units into D tier, so this should be fair. And yeah, Lyn or Lucius. Lynn has the combat, clearly. Even if her combat isn't great. Well, does Lynn have the combat? Actually, that might not be true. Yeah, Lucius doesn't have a lot of damage, but at least he attacks from afar. Lucius is incredibly fragile. I didn't mention this. Very, very, very poor defense. Like 1 or 2 defense, not even joking. And not the best HP. So he's bound to be one-shot by some enemies if you're not careful. Meanwhile, Lynn can probably survive 1 attack. He has like good dodge and everything. Yeah, well, Lucius, yes. He also doesn't have the availability. Well, he just comes 1 chapter after Lynn. Oh man, the fact that I have to struggle when ranking you against Lucius says a lot. But yeah, let's be serious here. Lucius needs a lot more training while Lynn still gets like the Manicati. And there's some value to be had with Lynn. She gets a lot of free deployment slots along the game because she's a force deploy. So you can get some sneaky kills. And then on promo, maybe you fix some of the problems and she becomes like a longbow, killerable bot. That's good enough, I think, to put her a little bit over Lucius, in my opinion. This is a debate. I can swing either way, but I'm going to put Lynn over Lucius for this one. Alright. Well, so if you watch my last FE7 series, you know just how much I like Marcus. It was called Marcus Emblem. And I was just aiming to check how good Marcus remains for the entirety of FE7 and how good he remains for the entirety of FE6. The answer is, in FE6 he struggles a lot more. In FE7, I did give him a good amount of stat boosters, yes, because that was the kind of the theme of the series. But I was surprised by how fucking powerful Marcus is. He's just a monster. The ability to use, like, he has good ranks. He has good stats. He has the best class or one of the best classes in the game. He has the best availability in the game together with, you know, like Lowen, Matthew, Hector, Eliwood. That he's up there for the highest availability in the game. He kills almost everything in a single shot. And when he stops doing that, he's normally fast enough to kill in 2 shots. And when he stops doing that, he's tanky enough to lure enemies and to still like contribute something to your army. Something that can be said about Marcus is that he can be a little bit too strong. It can be hard for you to set up kills for other people, but that's hardly an inconvenience. It's just like, okay, this guy is so strong that I have to be careful when using him. He also doesn't get a lot of experience during the early game. That's fine enough. But he's already promoted. He doesn't even have to compete for the promo. He's strong. He kills everything. He tanks everything. He's one of your best options to defeat bosses for like the first half of the game. He retaliates from a distance. He can use plenty of effective weaponry from like any kind. Yeah. Yeah, as you know, the best unit in the game. Not much more to be said here. You can debate me about this in the comments. I welcome it. But Marcus is the best unit in the game. He's at least he is clearly the best unit for the first half of the game. And then in the second half of the game, you can still find a lot of places where he can be useful. So if you take like the weight of those contributions during the first half and how he is still relevant for the second half, then what remains is an incredible unit. Marcus's worst chapters are probably either Arcadia, which actually isn't called Arcadia. Arcadia is the FE6 one, but you know what I mean, the desert map, because he doesn't have the best mobility in the desert for obvious reasons, but even there, he can take care of some enemies. And the final map, In the final map, he's not that incredible because the whole thing with Marcus is that he doesn't grow into an incredible pile of stats. He is a pile of stats at the beginning that doesn't grow a lot. So by the end game, you probably have better units to deal with those, you know, balls of stats that are the bosses in Light. So in that sense, Marcus needs a little bit of support. Like, soloing the game with Marcus is probably easier than soloing the game with anyone else. Maybe Hector. Maybe you can make the argument for Hector being able to solo the game easier, but he's also much slower. He's also, like, he takes a bit longer to grow into a strong unit. Marcus is, yes, a monster from the beginning to the very end. For that reason, I have to give him the highest ranking in the game. And if I could put him alone in a tier, you know, in an S+ tier, I would do it. Because he's just one of those units that are so good, you cannot help but to be surprised by the fact that intelligent systems just decided to make him like this and you know, tested the game and said, yeah, it's fine. If they just want to beat the game, let them use Marcus. As I said, the tiers are supposed to reflect how much you are going to notice if you are using these units or not. Believe me, the difference between using Marcus and not using Marcus is very noticeable. So that's basically it. Okay, we now come for a very different unit, Matthew. Everything I said about Legault kind of applies, right? I have tried promoting Matthew into an assassin. I have tried to make use of his overkill speed and decentish strength to sort of turn him into a fighting unit. That's not the way. The way is to be a utility unit for the entirety of the game, steal stuff, open doors, open chests, and just be a thief. And Matthew is just the best at doing that because he's available from a bit earlier than Legault, and because, well, Jaffar doesn't ever get the option to not be an assassin, he's an assassin at base. So in that sense, I just have to rank Matthew over Legault because of the availability. It's true that Legault's stats might allow him to do a bit of combat and to potentially survive an enemy or a siege magic attack that could kill Matthew. But aside from that, Matthew is solid as hell. So as I said, clearly over Legault. And because of his contributions, let me think. Matthew joins, and then you have... Well, you do have the Whereabouts Unknown chapter where he's pretty good. Yeah, he's very, very good in Whereabouts Unknown. Opening chests there. And opening doors and... yeah. I'd say just because of Whereabouts Unknown, I have to put him at least over you two. And then there's the early part of Dragon's Gate. I guess he does a lot of stuff there that Legault kind of comes a little bit too late to do. So yeah, his contributions in Dragon's Gate and Whereabouts Unknown are the main reasons why I would put him high. He's also the only one that can steal it's either a Speedwing or a Elysian Whip. I think it's a Elysian Whip from a Pegasus Knight in the boat when you're heading for the Dread Isle. So that's also something that only Matthew can do. Yeah, in that sense, Matthew should be there. He's a great thief, and in a game where thieves are sort of valuable, so you know, C tier is pretty fine. Ooh, okay. Merlinus. Well, Merlinus is kind of not great. I'm sure people know some things that only Merlinus can do, and it is true that deploying Merlinus is free. Like, you can deploy him without any cost because he can be deployed freely. He doesn't take up a space, and if you have Merlinus survive multiple chapters, like every time he survives a chapter, he gets a level, he grows stronger, and by the time he reaches level 20, he promotes into a transporter, which means you can have him moving around and doing some shopping even. So he's not without his uses. I just find him to be a bit too weird to kind of rank as a unit, if I have to be honest. He's decent. He's just not great. F tier. I could consider, him not being able to die and being able to distract some enemies as part of his utility, but if we are being honest, he's just like a convoy, and if you do the planning well enough at the beginning of the game, you shouldn't need access to the convoy, because FE7 maps aren't that incredibly long, and well, if they are long, all the more reason to not depend on Merlinus, because he just stays stuck at the beginning of the map. Protecting him can be a bit of a hassle. It's true that he's maybe a good unit to do shopping with in battle preparations. Yeah, that's probably it. Worst unit in the game? I think he's still probably better than Karla. So that says something about my idea of how useful Karla is, because at least this guy does something in battle preparations. There we go. That's it. That's enough. Okay. Next. Nils and Ninian. Okay. I'm going to rank them together, if you don't mind, because they are basically the same unit. And Nils is sort of like Ninian for limb mode, even though I said I don't want to rank limb mode. They share the same stats, they are basically the same thing, right? Let's be serious here. And Nils comes only for the final map, so you could consider Nils to be like the unit that is only available for the final map, but they are basically the same, right? Well, actually not only the final map, Victory or Death and the final map. And I think he's also available for the Legend, the Thunder Axe, the Blazing Sword, the one chapter where you control the Lord and only a few more units. But I don't normally tend to deploy him there. Yeah, he's an interesting unit, but I'm going to just say he's the same as Ninian. And Ninian and Nils, they are good. They are very good. They are dancers. I do think that FE7 is not a very player face focused game. I think it's very enemy face focused. I think placing a unit correctly and letting them deal with the enemies with a hand axe, with a javelin, is the core of the gameplay and is the easiest way to beat the game. But dancing a unit and killing one more enemy and dancing the most useful unit you have available, sometimes a healer or an extra heal on someone, sometimes a fighting unit that needs to get somewhere, sometimes one of your best combat units, sometimes an archer that was the only one that could kill an enemy that's far away. Being able to do that and being the only unit to do that is what makes dancers so valuable. But if that wasn't enough, in this game they have the rings. Instead of dancing, they can do Nini's Grace, Phila's Might, and the other two that no one cares about. I think Set's Litany and Torsire. Set's Litany and Torsire give like a bit of a void, a bit of critical. That's not the best boost in the game, so no one really cares about those. But Phila's Might gives plus 10 damage dealt. Plus 10 damage dealt, you heard that right. And Nini's Grace gives minus 10 damage taken. So it makes one of your units a lot tankier or a lot more offensive for a turn. It's true you can't dance that turn if you do that, but if you're setting up for a boss, if you're setting up for a complicated turn, using the rings is an incredibly powerful resource, and I think they are limited to 20 uses each, so it's not even like you can't use them for very long. Yeah, even in a game where dancers I don't think are as incredible as they are in FE7 or even in Conquest. I would say in Conquest Asura is better, but you are still a steer. Not surprising for me to put an answer in a steer, right? Okay, yeah, I'm going to... Okay, I just refocus the image, and yeah, these two guys are on S tier. The only thing to discuss now is whether I think they are better than Hector. Of course, we are not talking about combat here, we're just talking the combat that Hector provides during the whole game. Is it better than the support that Ninian / Nils provides for half of the game? And the answer is, I think they are more valuable. And I will get to why. Hector's combat can be replicated. I think there are some units in this game that can do combat that is just as good as Hector's, or maybe even more. Hawkeye, for example, is comparable to Hector. Harken is definitely comparable to Hector in a lot of aspects. His combat is sort of similar. Even to a degree, you know, a well-trained up dart or a well-trained up cavalry that is just outshining Hector in terms of movement, but still has the same access to 1-2 range. All those units have very good combat and are basically doing the same thing that Hector should be doing. Any unit with good combat is basically providing your army with the same thing that Hector is, good combat. Meanwhile, Ninian and Nils, they are impossible to substitute with anyone else. They have the ability to give you an extra turn, they have the ability to give you extra damage, they have the ability to give you extra bulk, and that's just too valuable for me to ignore. In fact, Fiora should also be under them. I don't know why I didn't take that into account, but more or less the same reasoning. Fiora can be substituted by Florina, by Heath, even by Farina later on. So yeah, these units, they are pretty unique. They are kind of great at what they do. Without the kind of, they are great at what they do, but they can be replaced. They can't. They can't. And Marcus, well, self-explanatory. Marcus is so strong for so long that even everything that they do just doesn't overcome the the craziness that is Marcus. Okay. So with that out of the way, that double feature of Nils and Ninian, we go into the third Nino. And oh boy, there's a lot to be said about this unit, and not everything is going to be nice, I can warn you. So Nino is the Est archetype unit in this game, meaning she's the trainee unit that you're supposed to give a lot of experience to, kind of late into the game, for her to snowball into an incredible unit that outperforms everyone in your army. There's some problems with Nino. First one being, even for an Est archetype unit, she joins a little bit too late. I think Est herself in FE1 joins earlier comparatively. I think if I'm thinking about an Est in FE6, someone like Wendy or Sophia clearly join earlier. The one that has the closest joining time and is sort of the same archetype is Sis. He also joins earlier. Delcia joins earlier. I don't know, every trainee archetype that has proven to be sort of decent in the past joins earlier than Nino does. Nino is asking for a lot. She's not asking for 1 or 2 levels, she's asking for like 13 levels and then promo and then more levels, and in the midst of them of this you need to get like weapon ranks on top of weapon ranks on top of weapon ranks. Her starting weapon rank is not that horrible. I'm pretty sure she has like C rank on base, which means she can use Hellfire, so a decent tome. And her starting stats are not even horrible. But if you really were to use Nino, I would say you should try and promote her as soon as possible, which kind of goes against the basis of the S archetype, which are give me a lot of stats, give me a lot of power, and make me into a strong unit that makes it worth training me. Even if you were to train Nino up to the point where she has like A ranking reason, yeah, wow. Okay, I've been playing 3 houses a little bit too much. A ranking tomes, A ranking staves. She would be kind of comparable to Pent on base. And she comes, she starts her training much later than Pent has that double A rank. And even if you are not using Pent, you are always going to get Athos in the final chapter, so Athos is also going to probably outperform her. That's that was complicated to say. In the final map, because he has Luna, because he has Forblaze, because he has Aureola. What is Nino going to do in the final map that compensates for that? Is she going to use Excalibur against Nergal? Is she? Nino just doesn't accomplish what she sets out to do, which is becoming the best mage in the game if you give her every ounce of experience that is available for her. Even if you do that, Pent is probably better by the end game, because I don't see Nino getting to A ranking staves. That just seems insane. And Athos is absolutely going to be better. So you're asking for a lot of investment and you are not getting as good as other units, so that just means you're a failure at doing what you set out to do, in my opinion. Still, now let's give some positives here. Nino does have acceptable starting stats. If you don't treat her as an S archetype, if you simply are playing, you're playing an Iron Man, you're out of mages, or your most powerful mage just died and then you're left with no options for magical damage, Nino is a fine substitute to join in. Her stats are not unsalvageable, and if you just give her some levels and you promote her immediately, you're going to get like a B reason, wow, again, B tomes, E staves mage, which is fine, it's fine. It's just not insane. She's like a feeling mage that after training her during Victory or Death or something, during Cog of Destiny, she might be useful for Victory or Death and the final map. That's about it. In that sense, I cannot give her the upper edge over any of these mages, really. Like, I think she comes out losing if you compare her directly to Erk or to Lucius. Honestly, there might be an argument to be made about her being a bit better than Erk, because Erk, even when trained, just doesn't get to be good, which is just very disappointing. But at least Erk isn't asking you for experience so aggressively, and Erk does provide you with a lot of combat for the entirety of the game. Nino is joining late, she's not the strongest by the time her training arc is done, and she doesn't have anything unique as a mage that makes her as powerful as Athos or even Canas. So D tier it is. Sorry, Nino fans, sorry, but only the truth here. Okay, next is Oswin. My opinions about Oswin kind of leaked a little bit earlier when I was talking about the competition for Nightcrest. I think that if you are competing for Nightcrest and the ones that come into the discussion are a bunch of cavalry and an armor, that's already like the best compliment you can give an armor, because armor knights tend to... It's kind of like the Nino situation I talked about, right? Nino sets out to be the best mage that there can be, to be a great damage dealer, to have some combat that no one else does. The reason why she's low is, among other things, because she doesn't accomplish that. Well, armor knights normally set out to be tanky. And that's it. They set out to be tanky, they set out to maybe do a decent amount of damage, but they don't set out to be fast units, to have good combat against mages, or to have high mobility. They are supposed to be a movable wall that performs a good defensive role in your army. And Oswin does exactly that. He joins together with Hector, and somehow, even if Hector is one of the tankiest, most capable fighters in the game, Oswin is able to outshine Hector for like some chapters before Hector catches up. His combat is very good, his starting level is pretty nice for that point in the game. His accuracy is very decent because he has good skill and very good strength also. Probably one of your best lance users for the early game together with Marcus. And yeah, overall, an incredible combat unit that is only held back by him being an armor knight and not being that mobile. But Oswin is a force to be reckoned with, and he has maybe, Marcus aside, I would say he has the strongest early game out of any unit in the game. Your objective, if you want to use Oswin in the long run, should be to give him a promotion before Dragon's Gate. If Oswin is promoted in Dragon's Gate, he will prove to be incredibly useful, arguably almost as useful as Marcus would be, because he's able to choke point very big groups of cavalry, and that's just incredibly valuable in Dragon's Gate. And yeah, the fact that he's up for discussion for getting the Nightcrest at that point in the game where the other units that won it are going to become paladins, and still you are considering the fact that maybe if you promote Oswin, you get like a walking wall that can just block entire halls of enemies. It's just very valuable, and it's something we have to take into account. Then Oswin after Dragon's Gate doesn't stay as incredible, we have to be honest here. Decent performance in Ship's Bond, I guess. Abysmal performance in the desert. Decentish for Fang Offense, depending on how you play it, but maybe not the best either. Kind of gets a second wind in Battle Before Dawn, in my opinion. If you have been training him to be a physical wall, you can make use of a physical wall in Battle Before Dawn, especially in the left side of the map. Oswin is a very valuable unit, but the thing that makes him valuable is especially his contributions to the early game. I'm going to put him in A tier. And I think one of the main reasons to do that is because he's very comparable to Harken. He is to the early game what Harken is to the late game. And there's no need for a lot of investment, there's no need for a lot of flashiness, he's just there, he does his job, and he's going to be incredibly helpful at it. I do think that because Oswin is there for longer and can grow into a decent unit for the late game, he has to be over Harken, but I'm not going to put him over Canas, because Canas, Luna utility and everything has to be over Oswin. Still, very good unit, whose contributions shouldn't be underestimated, and yes, yeah, incredibly good unit. Honestly, like one of the best performances out of an armor knight, together with Effie from Conquest. Alright, we've been talking about him for a while now. It was due to, having to inevitably compare every mage in the game to him, but here is Pent. Pent is an incredibly powerful mage that joins you like one chapter after the Fourfang offense. I think that's it. Yeah, one chapter after Fourfang offense. Together with his wife Louise, and as I mentioned, they have an A support together. And while Louise depends on being close to Pent and using that support to do very good damage, Pent is just an incredible unit and a monster through and through. You first get a look at this during the desert map, which is why I was so confused about his joining time, because he's an NPC during the desert map, and at first you think that the map is about saving Pent from the enemies, but as it progresses you realize that it's really about saving the enemies from Pent, because if you just leave Pent alone, he's going to kill absolutely everyone in that map and finish it because it's around the enemy. So that should already tell you just how powerful this guy is. Incredible starting stats, good speed, high magic, also, unless I'm mistaken, pretty decent resistance and defense, especially good resistance, good luck, good skill, not that you need a lot of it because magic is pretty accurate. I don't think I've ever seen his accuracy go below like 80%, which is insane. The natural 1 to range, the tankiness, and if that wasn't enough, he has a double A rank. A rank in tomes, A rank in staves, meaning he can basically use any weapon in the game aside from Excalibur at base. So even though he doesn't join the earliest, he is one of the most valuable units in the game, and for me the experience of using mages in FE7 is kind of always overshadowed by Pent. Because anytime you use a mage, you're thinking, okay, how good are you and how long do I have to wait to get Pent? Because Pent is better than you, obviously. The only unit that can hold up a candle to Pent in terms of being a mage in this whole game is Canas. Obviously putting Pent in A tier, I think that's no surprise. As incredible as he is, S tier is a little bit too much. The only unit that is comparable to him is Canas. And let's discuss that comparison for a little bit. Canas has more availability. Not a lot more. Has to be, well, considerably a lot more. Maybe like 6 maps, maybe even 8 maps, if you take into account, side quests and everything. He also has the dark type magic, so he can use Luna. That's basically it. And his weapon ranks are good enough that he's probably going to also have an A rank by the time Pent joins. The biggest difference is the staff rank. Staff rank on Canas is going to be E after promo, meaning he can hope to be C rank, maybe B rank if you have been using him a lot by the time you get Pent. The difference shouldn't be that relevant, but it is relevant, because there are some good A rank staves that you are aiming for, and especially a lot of B rank staves. So in the comparison, I still think that Canas is better. You are going to call me crazy for saying this, but Canas is able to contribute in a lot of very important chapters, one of them being Dragon's Gate. Like Canas' performance in Dragon's Gate gives him the upper edge, in my opinion. If he was available for the first time just after Dragon's Gate or recruitable only in Dragon's Gate, I would put him under Pent probably. Being able to use Luna is of course valuable and all, but Pent also has other stuff up his sleeve, like for example bolting. So it's not the weapon type that does it for me, it's the availability beating the weapon ranks. That's basically it. Still, they are very comparable. If you really want to use a mage for the entirety of the game, I'd say pick one of these two. maybe both of them. If you like Louise, then Pent and Louise used together works very well. Overall, comparable units, yes, one of them is pre-promoted and the other you can use for longer and you get to build yourself. That's the gist of it. Alright, now is Priscilla. Very interesting unit here, Priscilla. I don't know exactly what I'm going to say about her, because I've been talking about mages a lot, and yet I haven't given a lot of attention to, you know, healers. Because it's true, you can use mages during the early game, but where does the healing come from? Well, there's basically 2 healers available for the early game. One is Priscilla, the other is Serra. Priscilla is clearly the better of the 2, even if she joins a little bit later, I think like 2 chapters later, she still joins very early. Just after Link, just after the big like Link and Sain, Priscilla will group. Whereabouts unknown. And she does require Raven to be recruited or what? No, wait. I'm confused here. Actually, it's the opposite. Okay, let me rephrase. Raven is the one that is recruited in Whereabouts Unknown. Priscilla is already available by the time you get to Lim, meaning she's recruited at the same time as Erk, yes. So you've had Serra for like 3, maybe 4 chapters, considering Merlinus and all that. And suddenly you get a unit that is slightly inferior in terms of magic, I think, but also has a mount. And that mount is so valuable for the early game. Being able to rescue drop when you're not healing, being able to give healing to people that are a bit further away. Good starting weapon rank for healing. I'm pretty sure she has the D rank already, so that's good. On promo, she also gets the ability to do combat, and I've always felt like her combat was better than Serra's. Because light magic, yes, isn't incredible, so getting anima magic on promo is better. It makes Priscilla into a more consistent choice. And yeah, you know, just having a mount is all it takes for you to get the upper edge. So she's not an insane unit, but she's a good supporting unit that deserves to be in B tier. Because she's there for so long, she has to be at least over you and over Athos, in my opinion, and over Kent. Yeah, highest in B tier makes sense to me. Kent is a good combat unit, but you are going to need a healer probably for the early game, and Priscilla is as good as they come. Either you keep using vulneraries or you obsess over Serra. There are no other alternatives. So yeah, I would say using Priscilla is always recommended. Always recommended. Okay. Next is Rath. Ooh. Interesting. Okay. Well, Rath is a very particular unit. He's a bow user in a game where using bows is very valuable. There's no denying that. But is also not as valuable as having 1-2 range. So his starting class, I would say it's not the worst class in the game because it has a mount, it has the bows, so it's still miles over being a sword fighter, even over being a hero. I would argue I would take his class over being a hero. But most importantly, he's the only unit in that class. There are no other rangers. If you want to use a mounted bow user, Rath is the only unit available. He has a pretty interesting niche in the fact that he has low constitution, and because of the way the calculation for the units you can carry works, being low constitution and having a mount means he's one of the few units that can carry Hector. And I'm pretty sure he's the only promoted unit that can carry promoted Hector, because normally when you promote, you gain constitution and you lose the ability to carry people. Even after promo, I think Rath is the only one that can carry Hector even if he has promoted. Hector, I mean. So, that means his rescue dropping capabilities are, in that sense, the best in the game, and considering Hector is such an instrumental unit, and in some cases, the only unit that can finish the map, or if you are playing Hector mode, then we just have to put Rath up to a different standard. Like, he's the only rescue dropper that can do certain stuff. He's probably the best bow user, well, not probably, definitely the best bow user in the game, has good offensive stats, but he does struggle a little bit with enemy phase, even after getting swords, and he does struggle a little bit with pure tankiness. He's not tanky, he can be a bit dodgy, he can be a bit tricky to defeat, but he's not an unkillable unit, he's not a paladin, he doesn't have the pure combat that a paladin does. I'm not going to hold that against him. I still think that Rath is very useful. I've used him in the past and he didn't turn out amazing, but I also feel like I got a bit unlucky with levels. He's a bit low level by the time you get him, so training him up depends a little bit on luck, and because he joins at the same time as Heath, I can't put him over Heath. Honestly, that might be a good point to put you at. I think these are reliable units that are always going to have good performance in early game, good performance in late game. For Rath, it depends a little bit on the growths and on the promo. The promo, by the way, is basically whether if you have an Orion's Bolt, the one dropped by Hawkeye back in the Dread Isle chapter, realistically you have no better options to use it on, because yeah, using it on Rebecca, using it on Will, it's just not worth it when you compare them to Rath. So the promotion is basically free. In that sense, he has a slight advantage over Oswin, and the availability is slightly better than Harken's. But even through all that, the resulting unit is not as good as they are. So let's leave him at the bottom of A tier. I don't think there's a lot of A tier units left to discuss, so he's probably going to stay there, bottom of A tier, which is pretty good. It's pretty good. Ooh, okay, Raven. My dear old Raven. Very interesting unit to talk about here. I've always said in a certain way, even though Guy is the Myrmidon, the early game Myrmidon, Raven feels like he is the true Navarre of this game, both because of his attitude and because of how relevant he is for the gameplay, right? In my opinion, a Navarre is supposed to prove strong at the beginning and then drop off slightly and maybe need a little bit of love. Guy doesn't exactly fit in that description because he's not very good from the beginning. While Raven is pretty nice, he's fast, he's strong, his constitution is slightly poor, but if you are willing to put up with some of his weaknesses, his strength and his speed, and even to a certain degree his bulk, can grow up to make him into one of your best combat units. A trained up Raven can hold his ground against Harken easily, and I'm not afraid to say that. The only thing Harken will clearly have over Raven, very probably, is the weapon ranking access, because he has a B rank that I don't see Raven getting up to B rank for Pale Flower of Darkness, but at the same time, Raven will probably have a better rank in swords. He does need the promotion, the hero proof, to be able to promote, but if you notice, I didn't put a lot of units that need the hero proof in here. He basically would be competing against nobody. He's just a fast sword user for the early game, probably the best you have available, better than Lim, better than Eliwood, better than Guy. And then with promotion he gains the ability to wield axes, the ever so precious hand axes that turn him into a competent fighter. He's not incredible, he's not too unique, he trembles a little bit at the sight of the true combat monsters like Hector, or even the low investment units like Harken and Oswin. So I don't think he deserves to be in A tier, but I think for me he's at the top of B tier. I'm going to put him just over his sister here. B tier is good enough for Raven. He's a very competent fighter, but once again, all of these units have a little bit more than just being competent fighters. They either give some unique stuff, like for example, Berserker, Flight, Magic, the no investment thing, the bows. Raven, like deploying Raven normally means you have the spot to be able to do so, but I don't see him becoming even the top 3 fighting unit in your team. So in that sense, he's sort of filler, which is a bit of a weird thing to say about a good combat unit, but it's true. Like, he doesn't provide anything unique, he's just a good fighter, and you deploy him because you want your army to have more good fighters. That's about it. For his combat to be able to outperform the sheer utility of like a paladin or a healer, that says a lot about him, but I don't think it puts him into A rank. Not for me, at least. Okay. It seems like I've been talking about good units for too long, because here comes Rebecca. And yeah, Rebecca, she's not good. She's an archer. Not a sniper like Louise, not a ranger, no, she's just a measly archer. Foot unit, can use bows. If you promote her, she can keep using those bows. Not incredibly good at it. Pretty decent speed, pretty decent strength, but besides that, not much in terms of stats. The only thing that Rebecca can really boast is the availability. She is available in the second chapter in Hector and Eliwood both. So she's basically there for the early game no matter what. She can help with a lot of chip damage, and for that alone I think she's valuable. You know, the chip damage and the bow utility can be very useful. Especially in Hector mode, I would argue that Rebecca can have a bit of a niche at killing the Pegasi in chapter 2. That's kind of about where her utility goes out of the window though, because you either kill thousands and thousands of flyers, or how are you supposed to level her? She's not that strong, she doesn't have a good way to train in enemy phase. Even if you wanted to have enemies kill themselves against her in through a wall or something, because that can be done with archers, she's not tanky enough to pull it off. So I don't see Rebecca going too high in this tier list. I'm still going to put her in D tier, because I think she's better than these two, but not better than Nino even. So yeah, after everything I said about Nino, all the negative things I said about Nino, I think Nino is better at being a mage than Rebecca is at being an archer. Rebecca is just not that good, and if you're looking for a good option to use bows, I think even just waiting for Geitz to join is probably better in the long run. That's how pathetic Rebecca's performance is, you know? I'm almost tempted to drop her into the F tier, but I'm not going to be that cruel. No, because she does have some contributions during the early game, and those contributions are sort of valuable, and the chip damage is very much appreciated during the early chapters. So just because of that, and because of the Pegasus thing in the second chapter for Hector, I'm going to leave you very low in D tier. Probably higher than most people would expect me to. Ooh, okay. Now, one of my favorite characters in the game, actually, Renault. Really like Renault. I'm curious that I don't see more people talking about him because he's such an interesting character and such an interesting unit as well. Very late joining in the middle of victory or death, with incredibly weird stats that focus on skill and like sort of being defensive and a bit fast, but he doesn't have good magic. Of course, from the gameplay's narrative perspective, that's absolutely incredible because Renault turned into a priest after being a mercenary for a long time. So yeah, it's understandable that he wouldn't be comfortable with using magic. From the purely gameplay perspective, it makes him into not a very good unit. He's just basically a supporting unit that you get very long into the game that has the ability to use warp in case you didn't have someone to warp into Limstella's range with. He also has Fortify, he comes with a nice light magic tome to maybe attack some people with. He's a supporting unit. You shouldn't expect him to do anything other than support, and he's actually like not that bad at doing it. So kudos to him, I guess. Gets absolutely outclassed by Athos in the immediate next chapter. Well, unless you are playing the Kishuna chapter, I guess. I don't see Renault ever being like seriously used unless you have lost a lot of units or somehow are unable to use a better support, a better healer. But if you are out of healers and desperate for someone that is able to use staves at higher range, Renault can do that just fine. So you know, he's valuable in that sense, but comes a little bit too late to do anything too useful. I'm going to put him in D tier for that. I still think his contributions during victory or death are better than Rebecca, and I honestly think he's better than Nino as well, but I don't think he's better than Erk. I think that's going a bit too far, even if I've been doing my fair share of Erk hating. I think that would be going a bit too far. Okay. Now for Sain. Sain. Okay, maybe the fastest thing for you to do here is to go back, look for the Kent section of the analysis and play that, because everything I said about Kent, I can say about Sain. The availability is good. If I was able to get him with limb mode stats, obviously he would be better. I didn't mention weapon ranks, but the weapon ranks for both Kent and Sain are just not incredible, and I do think they compare favorably to like Lowen, because they have better growths, so they are supposed to grow into better units. Being a paladin is incredible, but even so, nothing too crazy to talk about. His stat distribution and his growth make him slightly worse than Kent in my opinion, so slightly worse than Kent is where I'm going to put him at. He's not a bad unit by any means, it's just that, I've been talking about paladins being incredible in this game, and yet you might be surprised by the fact that the only paladin I put in the A rank, above the A rank or in the A rank is Marcus. That's because paladins aren't great because of everything that they provide. They are great because they are the most flexible units in the game. They can both provide you with utility, with rescuing and dropping, and also with good combat. And they do so for a very long time in the game. If you were to group together the flyers and the cavalry, then I think my distribution is a bit more even, where I put Fiora here, then I put Florina, then the two of you, and then like the bottom tier mobility units for me, right? But yeah, Kent and Sain basically come in the same package. I prefer Kent a little bit more because of the speed. I do think that Sain has the potential to hit very hard in the late game if you try him. But I can't in good consciousness put any of them like on A tier, because I don't think they are that unique, and I don't think they come close to this performance. And during the early game they are decent, but they get completely outclassed by Marcus. And honestly, Lowen during the early game comes very close to them. The only reason I'm putting them higher is because they have higher potential to grow into competent paladins. So yeah, that's about it for them. Only 4 units left to go, and the next one to discuss is going to be Serra. Serra is the other healer. We already discussed Priscilla, but Serra is available a little bit earlier. Like 2 or 3 chapters earlier. I don't really remember like every chapter in the early game. She's a good unit for the purposes of healing, but once the early game is over and your mages start getting, once your mages start promoting and they get healing, or once your army grows strong enough where maybe using a vulnerary is more valuable than carrying a healer around and healing them with Serra, you start noticing like her glaring flaws. No stats to talk about, not the best bases, not the best growth. On promotion, she gets to be a bishop, not the best class either, no mobility, clearly gets outclassed by Priscilla. As a supporting unit, I think Pent is immediately better, and Canas on promo can also give her a run for her money. Another big problem, Lucius is sort of better than her after the promo, so that leaves her like, the bishop situation for Serra is not the best. She's a bit of an underwhelming unit. A fine healer and a competent unit to have in your army for the early game, but if she were to not be in the game, I think everyone would use Priscilla and use vulneraries a lot, and they wouldn't particularly care. So in that sense, I can't call her like, I can't say that Serra is absolutely essential to beat the game, because that's just not the case. I think you depend a bit more on Priscilla. I feel the lack of Priscilla a bit more. Like, for example, last time I beat the game, I forced myself to use Serra instead of Priscilla, and I felt Serra falling short. The utility is still there. A bit... No, not even on par with Legault for utility. Opening chests, healing people. I mean, let's be honest, if you train her enough, you should be getting to... you train her enough, you give her the promo, and physic is almost guaranteed. And being able to use physic is pretty valuable. So in that sense, I'm going to put her over Dart under Louise. Louise doesn't need the investment, and having someone that can use bows if you haven't been using Rath is also very good. So I think this is a good point to put Serra at. As you know, there in the middle of C tier, good healer, use her for a little bit, and then probably bench her. Alright, next is Baida. Intriguing unit Baida. Okay. Baida comes very late in the game. Earlier I was saying that Nino was very late and so, but then I remembered Baida. comes in Cog of Destiny and not really early during the map, but also like after a while. The recruitment is a bit complicated because she's surrounded by other wyverns and she's an enemy. You can't kill her and then you know what I mean. She's not that easy to get to and easy to recruit, but if we take that out of the way, Baida has like pretty good stats for her starting point. Solid strength, solid defense, kind of slow, but it doesn't really matter that much because Victory or Death features a lot of slow enemies that she can do good combat against. A rank in both lances and swords, so that's pretty great for you know, being able to use silver weaponry, the spear that she comes equipped with. She's not going to grow into the strongest unit in your army, obviously, because she joins a little bit too late, but for a flyer to just come as a helping hand at that point in the game, it can be valuable. And it can be, you know, it can be a good filler unit for Victory or Death. So that has to be taken into account as well. Yeah, overall I like Baida. I like what she provides. I just wish she was able to provide it a little bit earlier. Definitely miles better than other late game filler units like Karel, or I would even argue that you know, her contributions to the army in the late game are better than Louise's, but Louise is there for a longer time. C tier, she still has to be C tier, just because of being a flyer and because of, you know, doing stuff for you. Also, I don't know what I was thinking about, but Rebecca is clearly worse than the fighters. I don't know what I was saying about Rebecca and the Pegasi and everything, but I was thinking about this in the back of my mind. Like, what the fuck? The fighters at least have some enemy phase for the early game, and okay, you can do chip with the bows. They can do it with the hand axes. What the fuck was I on? No. Rebecca is a bow. Bows aren't good. That's it. Let's get back to Baida. So Baida, in my opinion, as I said, the contributions to the army are better than those of some filler units like Louise, or like well, the newly promoted Eliwood is like comparable to Baida, but he has been helping for a while. Nah, she's not better than Legault, but she is better than Gear, right? Legault is helpful. Guy, I mean, Guy has the availability. Maybe I should be putting Baida in D tier. No. Yes, I will be putting Baida in D tier, and I will be putting Lin in C tier. I think I've been a bit too harsh with Lin, honestly. I think it's not fair to have a tier of difference between Guy and Lin. I think Guy is a bit more competent for the early game, but I think Lin's promo gives her the bows, and that's like the upper hand. No, I regret what I said. Lin is still better than Baida, but that's about it. Baida being able to fly and everything still gets her the D tier. I'm not going to put her higher than that, but yeah. I will reconsider placements at the very end, but for now we're going to leave it like that. I think Baida is worse than Lin in the long run, but I think Baida is clearly better than Karel, and I think she's better than Lucius also. So there we go. Wallace. Okay, interesting. I haven't been able to discuss Wallace for a while. I feel like he's one of those units that go by a bit unnoticed. And I get why. So Wallace is an armor knight that joins during 4 flanked offense if you pick the Geitz version. Kind of the same situation as Geitz. The problem is that, well, I talked earlier about armor knights aiming to be like very tanky and like sort of movable walls and very defensive units, right? By the time Wallace joins, his tankiness is just not good enough. It's true he has good weapon ranks, air ranking lances and deer ranking axes, I'm pretty sure. So the lances are doing very, very well. The stats are there, like there's some defense and there's some even like good enough speed to not get doubled by everyone. But his most stellar performance is probably in his joining chapter, and then afterwards you are going to start running into some enemies that either out-damage his defenses or outspeed him and just stack up on damage. So he doesn't successfully work as a tank for me. I'm sure if you were to give him like multiple Draco shields and just bet everything on Wallace being your wall, no pun intended, then he would be able to perform a little bit better, but as it stands, Wallace is kind of a prime example for that filler unit that doesn't really work that I mentioned with Baida. In fact, I would say he's directly over or under Karel for me. I would say over, just because of 1-2 range. Throwing a lot of shit on Karel by putting Wallace a little bit over him, but yeah, that's just the way it goes. I do think that Wallace is a little bit better, because he has a very good performance in for Fangel Fence. In the Geitz version, he can block a lot of enemies, and that's just something to consider. So yeah, and clearly not better than Lucius, clearly not better than units that actually have good availability or actual good combat. He actually gets to be a good combatant by the time he's done training, so yeah. I think Wallace there in D tier is fine. Is fine. And finally, Will. What a unit to end up with. Will. The last unit in Lindes's Legion. The last unit to join together with Lind, with Kent, with Sain, with Florina. Which means he has one chapter before Whereabouts Unknown in a chapter called Noble Lady of Kaelin. And yeah, Will is just not good. He's not good. He's not good. He's not good. Everything I said about Rebecca, times 100. Well, not times 100, but plus 5 or plus 10. Like, not a good archer. Not even like not good because he's an archer, also not a good archer. Not fast enough to double as an archer, so your offense is kind of cut by half. Not even that accurate, not a lot of attack. Kind of wants to be the well-balanced archer that has a bit more tankiness than Rebecca. That's not working for you, bro. Also, he misses the Pegasi that Rebecca is able to kill in the second chapter. So in that sense, he's also missing like an important benchmark for an archer to do stuff. It's true he has a bit of a renaissance in the during the boat chapter. If you are able to get him that far, then he might be able to kill some flyers. That's about it. Honestly, I'd rather shoot myself in the dick than solo the game with Will. He seems like... I actually used Will. I actually defeated the final boss with Will once, okay? So I know what I'm talking about. I've used Will in the past, and he's not that good. He's simply not that good. And we just have to sit down and accept that fact. Slightly worse than Rebecca, still better than Merlinus in my opinion, because Merlinus is so weird, so I don't know where to put him otherwise. I still think that Will should be over him. Karla, worst unit in the game, yeah, that basically fits. Okay, so let me check the units, as I normally do, let me check the resulting tier list and see if I'm happy with the results, if this is what I want to set as my final tier list. So at the very bottom we have Karla. Horrible availability, class, stats, absolutely everything, not useful as a combat unit, and combat unit is the only thing that she can do. Merlinus with the ability to do absolutely nothing for you, and yet it's probably better than what Karla can do for you because he can do the shopping in the battle preparations. The couple of archers, with Rebecca being the slightly superior one because of her availability and because of her stats being a bit more offense focused, so in that sense I think she's better. And then the couple of fighters, more or less same reasoning, same join time, but the stats on Dorcas give him a bit of an edge. That's the F tier for characters that if you don't use, you probably won't notice because most people aren't using them. Then next is the D tier. D tier is for characters that are maybe they could have their time to shine, but for most people they are going to be unnoticeable if they are gone. We have Nino, a bit of a shining star that never quite gets to shine so bright. Training unit if you want to go through that pain, but overall not worth your time. There are better mages in the game, basically every other mage. Renault for a pretty relevant filler mage during the final like 2 or 3 maps. Then we have Erk, basically the most underwhelming a mage can get in basically the entire Fire Emblem series. Another very underwhelming Sword Master in Karel that, I don't know why you would pick him over Harken unless you really like the character. Wallace with a decent performance for 1 or 2 chapters and then he drops off like crazy, not the best tank. Lucius, I have to say, do I want to put Lucius over you? Like this? Yeah, okay. I prefer that. So Wallace only able to be useful for like 1 or 2 chapters, and for by days exactly the same. Although the performance in those 1 to actually 3 chapters is a bit more relevant. It's helpful for the Sands of Time tanking there with the Delphi Shield if you want, because there's a large amount of archers, and then in Victory over Death she actually has pretty good performance because of all the mountains and everything. So if you need a new flyer to carry you over the mountains, by the is your girl. Then Lucius, at least just because of the promo to Bishop giving him the extra healing options and his starting level not being horribly bad, I think he can safely stay in D tier. And just over him is Ling, with not the best combat performance, but she does get like a free promo at some point with the Heaven Seal. She gets a bit of utility with the bows. She's not completely unsalvageable, and she does have like overkill speed and skills, so there are things going on for her. Then on C tier we have average units, maybe the type of units you tried once and then you decided to not try again because they are not essential for you to beat the game with. We have Guy, another Myrmidon. You might notice that the foot-bound sword users are not that good in this game. We have Legault for the thief utility, fine unit to use. Dart, a bit of axe use, hand axes, fast, strong, but not that accurate. Serra for her contributions in the early game and that not doing much. Louise, a filler for bow utility if you need one. Matthew, basically just as good as Legault but for a bit longer. Geitz, for a bit of an obscure niche filler, also the bow utility can be appreciated. And finally Eliwood. Even though he's the Lord and he has very good availability and everything, the performance is average and he only really gets good once he promotes into his mounted Lord. Then on B tier we finally have some units that have consistently good performance and should be, you know, considered in your army if you have the space to deploy them. We have Farina, a bit of a hard recruitment that, you know, kind of spirals into a monster combat Pegasus by the end of the game. We have Lowen, sort of a hard-to-train paladin that still has some good utility and exceptional availability. Isadora, sort of in the opposite spectrum. The availability is not the best, and she comes ready to go, and the low investment makes her a good option. Jaffar's overkill speed makes him a good combat unit for the late game. Athos, incredible starting weapon ranks and stats and everything, but very, very low availability, so just there for the final chapter. Kent and Sain, yeah. Kent and Sain, basically the same unit. The Christmas Cavaliers that can grow into decent paladins, but will need a little bit of investment to do so. Priscilla, who's basically going to be your primary healer unless you are really into ping her twin tails. And then Raven, finally, for a good combat unit with a bit of sword usage, but that, unlike Yi and all these guys, gets saved by those hand axes on promo. On A rank, we have more unique units, units that can provide a bit of a niche performance, that maybe are there for longer, that maybe have better stats. Starting with Rath, easily the best bow user in the game, mounted one at that, and exceptional rescue drop capabilities, being able to carry promoted Hector. We also have Harken, a bit of a late joiner, but with a good amount of stats and weapon ranks that make him a valuable option for, well, basically every map after that. We have Oswin, early game pick, clear contender for the Night Crest, nice wall, and honestly doesn't work that badly into the late game as well. Pent, kind of a dominating force in terms of anime usage and just elf firing and thundering people into oblivion while also having good support capabilities. Canas is a bit more of a complicated mage to use, but when you use him right, he's able to outperform him and Pent with Luna, with dark magic being very powerful, and with his pure tankiness being slightly better. Heath, for a wyvern that, you know, is actually there for a large, well, not a large, but a decent chunk of the game. A bit of a trainee, but if you train him, well worth your while. Hawkeye joins during the mid game, incredible unit that can basically decimate a lot of people for a while, tank enough to survive some enemies, strong enough to one-shot a lot of them, so nice. And finally Florina for all those flying needs you might have during the early game, as well as some combat that, if you get lucky, might just turn her into a good unit. And finally, in the S rank for the best units in the game, we have Hector, the man that popularized the phrase just deploy Hector, see if I care, I don't give a fuck. You just put Hector in the middle of a lot of enemies, they normally will die, but use with caution because he has some limitations. We have Fiora. In terms of movement, the best option you have available for a long time in the game, can get anywhere, can carry a lot of people into complicated positions, and has good combat on top of that. We have both of the dancers, thanks to, well, both the unique support they give by allowing you to move again, and also the incredible buffs with Nini's Grace and Phila's Might especially. Well, no one cares about Thor's Sire and Set's Litany, so let's be honest, those are the important ones. And finally, the best unit in the game, Marcus, because he kills absolutely everything during the early game, he kills absolutely everything during the mid game, and he kills most enemies during the late game. So yeah, why not just put Marcus at the very top? I'd say I'm pretty happy with the result here. The units have been well distributed. Maybe the lean Lucius debate is still up to grabs in my head. Maybe I could put Will a little bit higher over Legault, even over Dart, but I will leave you to discuss all that in the comments and to tell me what a horrible or what an incredible job I did in this tier list. Hope you all enjoyed. I've been talking for a while. It's been 3 hours to the dot. So yeah, it's going to be a 3-hour tier list, which means from my experience, not a lot of people are going to watch it. But hey, if even 1 or 2 of you watch it and enjoy it, be sure to tell me in the comments, to like, to consider subscribing as well. And yeah, as always, this has been Pomum. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!